Okay, so I think we can start now. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the question and answer session with the current students held as part of the Experienced Grad York. My name is Yuko Sorano, and I'm the manager of external scholarships and graduate awards at the Faculty of Graduate Studies at York University. I'll be moderating session today, joined by three current graduate students, whom I will introduce in a moment. As in many other sessions, I will start with land acknowledgement. York University recognizes that many indigenous nations have long-standing relationships with the territories upon which York University campuses are located that precede the establishment of York University. York University acknowledges its presence on the traditional territory of many indigenous nations. The area known as Toronto has been caretaken by the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Huron-Wendat. It is now home to many First Nation, Inuit, and Métis communities. We acknowledge the current treaty holders, the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory is subject of the Dish with One Spoon, One Spoon Belt Covenant, an agreement to peacefully share and care for the Great Lakes region. So this week we've had many sessions during the Experienced Grad Week, and I hope you've had a chance to attend some of the sessions. And the sessions are recorded as well. So the question and answer session that we're having today is the second of the sessions. So the first one took place on Tuesday. If you weren't able to attend but are interested, then the recording will be made available as well. So one sort of unique thing about this session is really this is a place where you can get asked questions to the current students about what it's like to be a graduate student. And I hope you have a good sense after this session to sort of, think about grad school and what you can expect and sort of the journey in the graduate program. Okay. So I'm going to introduce the student who are panelists today, who are kindly joined to be on the panel today. The first is Fawa Sajadi, a biology student, doctoral student in biology. Next, Carly Albaum, a psychology student in the doctoral program. And Pedro Garcia, who is also a doctoral student in the civil engineering program. So you can see that they study in very different disciplines, and our hope is that, that they'll be able to also offer diverse perspectives. So let me quickly describe the format. So first ask each student to introduce themselves first, perhaps talk about their research and study sort of area of focus. And then after that, we have a series of questions that we have already received from our audience who have registered for this session. So we'll start with those questions. But you can also you're welcome to pose any questions in the question and answer box. We'll be moderating that throughout the day and be able to ask those questions to the panel as much as possible. So we may not be able to cover all of the questions, but our hope is to be able to cover a wide range of questions that the prospective students are interested in finding out about. Okay, so let's begin with introduction. So can I ask each of you on the panel to introduce yourself with, again, a brief description of your area of study or research that you're conducting, so the audience can get a sense of who you are. Okay, so we'll start with Fawa.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Yuko. My name is Farwa. I'm a PhD candidate. I started my master's in 2017 and transferred over after my first year. I work in the Faculty of Science, specifically in the biology department, and my research focuses on more so the molecular and physiology stream. So I look at the neuroendocrinology of mosquitoes, so looking at disease vectors.
Great, thank you. Next, Carly.
Thank you, Yuko. Hi, everyone. My name is Carly Albaum. I am also a PhD candidate in the clinical developmental psychology program. I'm in my fourth and final year of my program, or hopefully final, I should say. And my research area is in autism and mental health, so looking at various mental health interventions for kids on the autism spectrum. And then I've also been completing my clinical training, which focuses on child psychology more broadly.
Great, thank you. Pedro?
Hey everyone, thank you, Yuko. My name is Pedro, and I am also a PhD candidate. I just started my second year. I also did my master's here at York University, and my field of study is seismic retrofit of old structures and also of new structures for them to attend current build provisions without causing many issues on the structure. So it's a research on the civil engineering department, and that's it.
Okay, great, thank you. And we'll have a lot of chance to talk about sort of a little bit more about your research, your study environment, and support from the program and so forth. So that's great. So the first question is, what inspired your decision to pursue a master's and doctoral degree? So all of you are in the doctoral programs. If you can first talk about why, first of all, you decided to pursue a graduate degree, and then why you decided to continue on to the doctoral program. So I don't know who would like to start. Maybe I can just, does anyone want to start? If not, then I can ask Pedro to start. Okay.
Yes, so I started my master's because I wanted to learn a little bit more about seismic retrofit of structures. So I'm an international student, so I'm from Brazil, and we don't have this type of technology in the country, mostly because we are not affected by earthquakes. So when I came to Canada, I wanted to specialize a little bit more on that field. And I was able to have 1 year of exchange study in another university here in Canada. So I was able to research on the topic on seismic engineering. I participated in some co-ops, and I saw that it was a really fascinating field. So I decided to conduct my master's on that. So when I started my master's, I wanted to specialize myself on the topic. But then when I started my master's and I TA for the first time in one of the classes, I realized that teaching for me was something that it was incredible and fulfilling. So I decided to pursue my PhD mostly because I realized that research field is something that gives me excitement. And it's also really helpful for the community because we are studying issues that are going to make the community better with our research. So because of that, I realized that, okay, I should do my PhD, mostly because I like teaching. It's a field that I want to be a professor someday. And also I like conducting research. So for me, it was something more of a calling, per se.
Okay, well, great to know. Carly, you answer to that question as well?
Yeah, so for me, I think my end goal has always been to be able to register as a clinical psychologist in Ontario. And so in part of that, at least within this province, in order to practice as a psychologist, you do need PhD level training. So that was the one side of it. But then as I sort of acquired all this experience in research, I've been drawn to a career in academia, continuing in a career as a clinician scientist. And so that's also been now kind of a driver and a motivator for me to continue with my graduate school.
Okay, so Carly, in your case, so before you started your master's degree, you also were planning to do a PhD program eventually?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So when I started my master's, it was always the plan to continue on to the PhD program. And the way my program is designed is it's pretty much expected that you do continue on to complete the PhD training after you finish your master's. It's very uncommon that students would stop at the master's level.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and yeah, so I think in some programs it is more common for the sort of master's and doctoral to be almost like together, and in some other programs, of course, students come back to do their master's and maybe go on to do something else, sometimes return to the doctoral, sometimes not at all. So, but it is good to know in the psychology program that's often the case. What about you, Farwa?
So I think it was around my third year. So I mean, I've always knew I loved science. I was in the bio department and I loved my program. It was until I was taking these physiology courses and we were in these intense lab courses where I realized that the lab-based sections of courses were always where I was motivated to go in, and I really looked forward to doing the labs. And you kind of learn about the body and all the different processes that happen, but you sometimes forget about the whole research side. So I did an undergrad honors thesis with one of the profs for physiology. I ended up really liking it, so I asked if I could continue with the master's. And before even thinking about PhD, because a science PhD is a long commitment, right? It's like 3 to 5 years. So I was like, I need to know whether I really like this. And a year into my master's, I was like, there's no way I can finish my research in the short amount of span. And I'm like, I want to continue what I'm doing. I really like it. And like Pedro said, it's like this calling. It's like when I went into my master's, I knew that this is something that I wanted to continue into a doctoral program, because I love the lab setting. I love the research. And even though it has its ups and downs, it's something that I've always wanted to do.
Okay, well, good to know. Thank you. And the next question that again is to all of you as well, is why did you choose York University of all the programs? And again, I think you continue from master's to doctoral, but I guess that'll be then for the decision for you to join the master's program in the first place. Can I again start with Pedro? I understand that you are from foreign institution, so came to Canada, but why did you decide to first of all come to Canada maybe, and then also to choose York University?
Yes, first I decided to come to Canada way back in 2013 because it was a safe country, and I knew that the institutions here were really well developed. So when I first came in my exchange study, it was more of getting to know the country, learning about the research here and everything else. When I came for my master's, I had a specific idea of what I wanted my research to be. So I started researching about professors, about universities, about the laboratories, so that I could know if the university had the facilities to accommodate some type of research. And I knew that York had the facilities, and my supervisor is one of the best ones in the field, and it's somebody that I really liked working with. So that's why I decided to come to York. So it was more of the university was able to accommodate my research. The city is Toronto, so it's one of the biggest cities in the country, so it's always alive. So that was mostly what drove me here.
Very good to know. Yeah, thank you. What about you, Carly, for your decision to pursue your master's and doctoral at York? Is this a particular reason?
So for me, I actually did my undergrad at York as well. So for me, it was more of a question of staying at York for another 10 years after finishing my undergrad. It's been almost that long, which is so crazy. For me, there were a few things. I had applied to grad school outside of York University, and there were things I think that drew me here. Similar to Pedro, I work with a supervisor that is just really doing work that no one else in the country is doing. And that served as a very enticing opportunity to continue to work with him. I love the work that we do. And so that really drew me to stay. I was born and raised in Toronto. I have not left this city to live anywhere else. And I like that. There's a lot of resources in surrounding the city that are really beneficial to my training. The program that I'm in, we're affiliated or connected with a number of the hospitals and training sites in the downtown core, as well as the Greater Toronto area. So, we have opportunities to do placements at some of the, world-renowned medical facilities in right here in our city. So doing placements at Sick Kids, Hamilton Health Sciences, Toronto General. And so there's CAMH, which was a huge thing. And so there's a lot of benefits, I think, to being at York, for not being right in the core, but being in a place that's close enough to it that you are able to benefit from all those resources.
Yeah, that's great. Good to know. And I'm glad that you stayed at York. Fawar, so can you also say why you chose York University for the grad program?
Yeah, so I guess similar to Carly, I also did my undergrad here, and I'm pushing 10 years at York University as well. So for me, it wasn't even a question of attending grad school anywhere else. Like I said, I did my undergrad thesis here at York, and I really loved my research, and I loved my supervisor, the lab environment, which is so important when you think about a grad program. So I knew I wanted to continue with the same field with my research. So I only ever applied to the York grad program. So thankfully I got it. But York University, just the research program in general, has so many opportunities, not only for academia, but elsewhere as well. These scholarship opportunities, being able to go to conferences or share your research, not only in the local level, but also internationally. There's so many opportunities and support that the science faculty at York University has provided me that I'm not sure I would have been able to receive anywhere else. So just seeing what kind of research and environment the lab was when I was my undergrad, I was like, I can see this being this environment when I'm a master's or PhD student as well. So kind of just having that nice transition, like I said, it wasn't even a question. I just knew that I had to kind of continue my research at York.
Okay, well, good to know. Yeah, and then so that's true that I think we'll get to a little bit more about the questions of the support and the finances at the grad program. But York University does provide many different opportunities for students to be able to support their research for activities for scholarly and research activities as well. So that's good to know from your perspective. So the next question, continuing on your sort of choice of York University and the choice of the grad program that you are in, I'll first ask Pedro. How did you decide, so which program was right for you? I guess given that your research interest was quite specific, that you may have known that this is what you wanted to pursue, but also within engineering as well, there are many different fields. So like what kind of sort of preparation did you do, talking to people, finding out about different options? What was sort of the process for you to choose the program that you are in?
It was a long process. So during my undergraduate program, I was able to research with different fields, from the dispersion of particulate matter to analyzing the integrity of buildings through infrared, to geotechnical analysis. So during my undergrad, I was able to work with different fields, and I decided which one was more interesting to me. And ended up that seismic engineering was something that it was innovative in my country, and it's something that it's completely applicable if you see many of the disasters that you will have buildings failing. So it's something that requires attention. So it requires a study. So when I saw that and I saw that I could work on that field, that's when I decided which specific field I wanted to go for. And besides that, I wanted to work with something of innovative materials, something that is going to be applicable not only nowadays, but in the future. And so I started researching about those different materials that we can apply into the structures. And one of them were shape memory alloys, which is essentially a bar that once deformed and you release the stress, the bar goes back to its initial shape. So it's something that for me was completely innovative, and we could apply in the structures to increase the resilience of the structure. So that was what drove me to this field, because I was able to research myself for a long time, to talk to professors, to see how can we apply, how can we make structures better, to talk to different fields from different areas to know whether it's interesting to me or not, and then make a decision based on that.
And did you, just to follow up, did you also then contact the professors at York before you applying for the program?
Yes, I definitely did. So Dr. Palermo, which is my supervisor, I worked with him in Ottawa, back in Ottawa in 2014. And I already knew him, so I contacted him to get to know a little bit more of his research here in New York. And that's why I decided to come, because I said, okay, that's exactly what I want to work with. So.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, and the next question to Farwa, a little bit related as well. But so given that, Farwa, I think you mentioned that you did biology in undergraduate as well. So how did the undergraduate degree program sort of prepare you for grad program and the program you're in specifically? Do you find that yourself, you did undergrad in biology, do you find that that is the case with most other colleagues in your program? Or is it, do people have a different path to come into the graduate program in biology?
So the thing with biology is that it's such a broad field. You know, people don't realize that there's so many different streams of biology in general. There's the ecology stream, there's the cell and molecular stream, and then there's the physiology stream. So kind of going into biology, the first 2 years, you kind of learn about everything. And then it's not until third or fourth year where you kind of, like, I don't want to say specialize, but you can cater your courses toward what stream you kind of have more passion with. So it was until my third and fourth year that I realized that I really liked physiology or molecular biology. So I started taking my courses kind of catered towards that. And then it was then where I took a course, and the professor who was teaching it, I remember looking up his research and being really fascinated. I mean, I work with mosquitoes, which is not something that a lot of people would want to work in. And I still get questions about why I work with mosquitoes, but looking into the physiology behind it. And one of my favorite things in biology is learning about endocrinology, so how hormones work. So the last 2 years of courses that I took was very catered toward just endocrinology itself. So it's really nice how the biology program, it kind of starts very broad. So it allows you to take everything and learn about different types of streams in biology. But then once you kind of know what you like, you can start taking courses specifically with that. And then that really comes in handy when you're taking a grad program where it's very specific, the research that you're doing. So my research is specifically looking at endocrinology. So it was really nice that the courses that I took in my final years helped prepare me and gave me the background information and history that I needed to kind of take that and apply it to the research skills when it came to my grad work.
Okay, that's good to know. And Carly, I think you mentioned that you wanted to be a clinical psychologist from early on, but psychology itself is a fairly broad, range of programs within as well. What was your sort of experience in undergraduate programs in relation to your, what you're studying now? Yeah.
That's a good question. I'm in the middle of drafting my applications for internship. So I have to do a final 1-year clinical internship as part of my degree requirements. And for one of the essays I have to write, it's asking an autobiographical statement on what drew me into psychology. So I've been reflecting on this recently, actually. For me, it started, I actually never wanted to work with children when I was in high school. I was a camp counselor. I was like, I can't do this. Kids are exhausting. And here I am pursuing a PhD in child psychology. So that really started when I took a developmental psychology course in my undergrad, and we were given an assignment to do an experiment with kids, doing a little test with them that looks at their cognitive development. And I was just so instantly drawn to seeing young kids like try to reason and problem solve and their process for doing that. And on the other side of it, for me, mental health has always been something I deeply value. And as I learned more about how mental health in childhood really plays into our mental health in adulthood, and for the large majority of adults with mental illness, it does start in their younger years. I was just really became very committed to addressing that and working with youth to to really, help them become more resilient to some of the adversities that they've faced in their young lives.
That's good to know. So I guess in your case too, the experience in the courses, specifically in undergrad program, really shaped the student to pursue a particular area later on. That's good to know.
Yeah, it really did. And I think just getting involved in research early on as well in my undergrad, so volunteering in research labs that were studying topics that were sort of related to that in different ways, just continued to spark that interest for me.
Good. And I actually have a follow-up question from the audience. So what is the sort of difference? How different is undergrad and grad? And then within grad, master's and doctoral? Can you briefly describe sort of the difference between those different levels of study? And this is for Corey, by the way, sorry.
Yeah, so they are so different and in really different ways too. Undergrad is very different than grad school. There's still this feeling of being a student where you're learning and you're a bit more passive in that learning. You have like a set list of courses that you need to take and, really structured degree requirements that you're working towards. In your master's, that looks a little bit different. You still have, at least in my program, with my experience, we still had a lot of coursework. But there was also a bit more flexibility in terms of when you take courses, what electives you take. Everything is relevant to what you're interested in. You're not taking these extra credits that are outside of your program. And then in PhD, it for me felt like a very different transition where your professors, you're sort of working at a level where you're at this same level in a hierarchy to your professors and your supervisors, where they're beginning to see you more as a colleague versus as a student. You're really developing your independence as a researcher. You're working on projects that you're interested in. You're building research partnerships or community partnerships. You're really making your education about you and what you want to achieve and what your end goals are. And you have to start thinking about, like, what am I going to be when I grow up? That's like a question I have started to think about more. What am I going to be when I grow up? But it really becomes self-directed, self-initiated learning, and no one's really there to hold your hand through it, as they're only there as much as you want them to be, and it's really all on you to kind of figure out, what am I going to do next? It's more of these adult decisions versus student decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that is true, and it's that is true with the most graduate programs. Undergraduate program tend to have required courses. You take the courses about the grad and masters and PhD. Especially in the PhD, it is very much self-directed, and in some disciplines. So I think you're mostly in sciences and health, but in some disciplines like social science and humanities, it's often the student who comes up with the research topic, and they do they work with the supervisor for sure, but they don't necessarily work with the supervisor's project. The student have their own project, and then have the supervisor to support you through that process. So it is very true that the doctoral level, especially, it is very independent. Do you find that as a case with you, Fawa, for example? Like in your doctoral level, it is very much you leading your own project, or is it a bit different in your lab setting?
Yeah, definitely very independent. So I guess the difference with the science masters and doctoral programs, we don't really have a lot of courses. So with undergrad, obviously everything is structured and you follow this timetable. But during your master's program, you only have to take 6 credits of courses. So that can be anywhere between 2 to 4 classes, depending on the credit size. So I just took those 3 classes during my first year master's, and I haven't taken a class since. So it's been a really long time since I've been in a lecture setting. But there definitely is this feeling of more independent work from a PhD program compared to master's. Like when I was in my master's program, I was pretty much just doing my own work. Although I was independent, I still had my supervisor with me kind of every step, telling me what to do. After I finished a certain experiment, I would have to go to him and be like, okay, what do I do next? This is my result. What should be the follow-up experiment? But now that I'm in my PhD and I've been doing this research for the past 4 or 5 years, it's pretty much independent. Like I do my experiment and I know what to do next. It's more of that sense of you get more confident in what you're doing, because at this point you've acquired years of experience and skills, not only research skills, but also just communication, personal, all these skills that you've acquired that's kind of helped you become more independent in your research. And when you're in a PhD program, at least in biology, it's not only my research that I'm doing now. I have so many different little collaboration and side projects that I'm doing. I now have undergrads or master's students that I'm helping co-supervise. So it's definitely a lot more on your plate, but it gets to a point where you know what you're doing. It's very rare that, I don't want to say very rare, I still really rely on my supervisor, but I don't go to him as often as I did in my master's. So it's definitely that sense of independent individual work that you're doing. But the years of your master's helps you when you reach that point. It's always scary when you think about, oh my God, I don't know if I can do research individually. Like I remember when I started my master's, I was like, I need someone to tell me what to always be doing. Because it's nice in undergrad, someone always tells you, okay, this is the course that you're taking. You have to do this. You have to get this grade in order to do another course. But once you kind of get into grad school, it's pretty much all independent. It's like, okay, this is your research. This is your time frame. Go, right? And it's up to your schedule and your kind of mindset of how much you want to do, when you want to do it. And at first it's scary, and then it kind of gets exciting. It's in your own hands what you want to do. So it's definitely really nice, that independent feeling.
Okay, that's good. And it sounds like you're doing a lot of different things. Well, of course, you're working on your dissertation, but a lot of different things. So sort of the next set of questions. So then that is common with a lot of graduate students and probably students in general too. But do you ever feel a burnout? How, a sense of sort of being overwhelmed, and how do you deal with the feeling when that happens? And I want to ask this to Fawa and Pedro, and then maybe Fawa, you can start since you're talking about sort of your different elements of your study.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. There's definitely phases where I think even just earlier this week, I was telling my lab members, I'm like, I have zero energy this week. It gets to a point sometimes where, at least with like in like my department or my research, it's a lot of experiments. So there would be 1 week where I'm running a bunch of, let's say, Westerns or qPCR and all these different techniques in 1 week. And sometimes I'm in the lab for like 12, 13 hours. And I'm just here from morning to night, just running experiments back to back. And you go home. And then if you're also a TA, you have emails to reply to students. And the only time you pretty much have to yourself is little lunch breaks throughout the day, and then your sleep. And then you wake up and it's back to a full inbox from students and then back to your research. So you definitely have phases of burnout where you're like, I can't do this. And I think this is really important, to take breaks for yourself, because your mental health is so important when you think about grad school, because it is a huge commitment, and not only for your time, but it takes a lot of energy out of you, physical, mental. And there's moments where I have to be like, okay, you know what? I may not come in today, or I'm just going to do one experiment and then go home and just take a day for myself, or go get a coffee and maybe not reply to students for a couple hours. I need to be away from my phone, because it does get to you. There are points where like, it's a lot. So I think it's really important for grad students to take breaks here and there, to take days for themselves, because that not only will help them in the future, because if you're burned out, then you're not really going to do well in your experiments or your research, right? Because then you're not at your 100%. So the burnout is really there. It's real. It's just, you need to always put your own health and mental health as a priority and take those breaks. And if you have an amazing supervisor, which I have, like, you just tell them, hey, I may just take a couple days, or just a day just to myself, and then I'll be back the next time. And then obviously they're going to be like, of course, take some time. But yeah, you definitely need to prioritize your mental health and just take days for yourself.
Good, thank you, and thanks for sort of your honest sort of experiences and how how it could be challenging, but also there's a way to sort of give yourself a break and to deal with that. What's your experience being Pedro in that regard of being stressed or overwhelmed at school?
I think the stress and this feeling of burnout depends a lot on which stage of the research you are on. So if you are in the stage of going to the lab, conducting experiments, and you also have courses to take, and you are also TAing, it comes to a moment that you feel like completely overwhelmed. That was with me on the first semester of my master's, first term. So I was taking 3 courses. I was TAing for the first time. And on top of that, I had to start my research. So I was constantly either studying or eating, just like in the lunch breaks, or grading assignments or preparing to TA the next morning. So it was like a constant stress. But then after that, I was able to manage my time more accordingly to my own limits. And I would thank my supervisor and some other professors in the department, because in the first courses, they would give some types of advices, how to not feel burnout, how to avoid this type of mentality. And this helped me throughout my master's and through my PhD as well. So I started taking some of their advices, like try to exercise at least once a day, even if you are completely stressed. Try to take some time for yourself. So I started including those self-care breaks during the day for every day of my studies. And I started feeling way calmer, way like even more concentrated into the work itself. So when you take breaks, even if you have a lot to do, everything else, you are able to go with a fresh mentality to the next duty. So, okay, now I have to work on my research. So you take a break, you go to your research, and you are able to be even more productive. So the burnout happens for sure. It will happen, especially close to your thesis defense, because you have to study, you have to complete some modifications, you have to prepare the presentation. So you will feel like that. But the way that you react to that situation, if you are able to take some time for yourself, you will definitely be able to go through it without any issue. So, and you have to keep in mind that this doesn't happen only to you. Everybody is feeling the same way. So don't get into your head thinking that, oh my God, I am unable to control my own time. So I'm a failure. So don't get into that head, because everybody feels like that. So it's just about phases, and you will feel like this one day, the next day you will feel way calmer, way more relaxed. So it's about keep going and just enjoy the ride, essentially.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. And it is a common experience for a lot of graduate students, probably students at undergraduate level as well. So just from sort of the university side, I would just also mention that we do recognize as the university, welcoming a lot of students from a diverse background, that and then the students who tend to do masters and doctoral degrees tend to be high achieving, have done very well in school, have very a topic that they're really passionate about researching on, and so forth. So that drive is really great, but also, as both of you mentioned, that to maintain good mental health and taking breaks is also important. And I also want to mention that the university does have services available. So for the central Pine University support, there's the accessibility services office, especially for students who need accommodation, either with some kind of some form of disability related, even if it's for short term or for permanent. So that support is available. The university have the obligation to accommodate where it's possible, because also it is good for the university to be able to have students with different skill levels and personalities in the background and abilities to be able to be successful on campus. So that is available. And in the last couple of years, we also have a dedicated counselor. So the counselor that meets and work with the graduate students, specifically recognizing the specific needs of grad students. So Anessa, I think, have a link for the services available to be able to provide. But in any case, so that sort of support is available from the university side as well. Of course, it's a student who eventually, work and does the research and graduate. But we also do recognize from the university side, not just to offer the research lab and the courses and environment, but also the kind of specific support to be able to have better mental health, while the students pursue the studies. So that I just wanted to mention that. But again, thank you for both of you for sort of mentioning a very sort of honest experience of going through and coping with the stress factors. Okay, so I think I'll change gear a little bit and talk about, and I have a question about the scholarships I think I had before. So, that's of course one of the really, important questions for prospective students thinking about master's and graduate studies. So I will ask this question to Carla and Carly and Farwa. What kind of scholarship opportunity did you seek, were able to support? And it doesn't have to be scholarship, actually it could be any other sort of support funds that you were able to access while you are a grad student. Maybe I'll start with Carly.
There are so many funding opportunities. It's really about seeking them out and putting in the work to get that funding. Unfortunately, we're not handed a lot of money. There is quite a bit of work that goes into getting money as a student. Some applications, some scholarships are more tedious in terms of the application process than others. There's lots of funding available within York for conference travel, for for professional development, smaller scholarships, and then of course there are larger external scholarships. So during my master's degree, I was supported through the Ontario Graduate Scholarship, as well as a internal autism research award through York. And in my PhD, I've been funded by a Tri-Council CIHR Doctoral Award. I'm also now currently funded by an internal award from York, the Susan Mann Dissertation Award, as well as I'm the Autism Scholars Award holder, Doctoral Award holder at this point. So I've been very fortunate in terms of the funding opportunities I've had. I can say that, not every student is that fortunate. Some of it is a bit of a lottery because there are so many candidates, and really the differentiating points between you and another applicant can be so minor. And that is the difference between, maybe you just get an application reviewer who rates someone else's application more favorably than yours. And that's just sometimes how it goes. But there is lots of opportunity, and really your supervisor is there to support you in seeking out those opportunities, getting you the funding, helping you find different awards. And also sometimes, depending on the type of funding your supervisor has, they're able to fund you through research stipends and things like that to do work for them. So my supervisor's also been able to support me in that way. So things like going to conferences, funding my travel for that, or my poster, paying for my posters to be printed, just really small things like that too, where every little bit helps. But I guess my broad answer is there's lots of opportunity. You just have to do a bit of digging for it.
Thank you. Yeah. Can I ask? Can you respond as well, Fawar, to that sort of a scholarship process and what kind of funding might be available?
Yeah. So like Carly said, there are a lot of scholarship opportunities, funds that are available, but like she said, you do have to seek them. So sometimes they are a little buried in the websites, and I am someone who does look through and scroll through all these opportunities to find something. But my supervisor is also really great in that he does he emails me and forwards me any opportunities that are available. So I have been fortunate enough as well to, I got the entrance scholarship when I did my master's. I was also holding the NSERC CGS for master's and the Vernon Strong Scholarship for Science. And then for my PhD, I was also awarded another NSERC scholarship for doctoral, and then the Carswell scholarship. So there are a lot of opportunities available, and it's nice that although scholarships are very competitive, depending on how many students are in the program, it's nice that at least with the internal awards for science, they have kind of separated it into either your program, so master's or PhD, but also in the stream that you're in. So sometimes we have specific awards that are, you know, just for physiology students or just for ecology students, students who are doing really well in genetics. Or so these are nice too, because then this kind of narrows down the field or the amount of students that are applying for these scholarships. So that's more likely for you to get this fund. But there's also, you have to put in the work, right? So when you are applying for these competitive scholarships, you need your application to stand out from everyone else. And this is where it's not just the research that you're doing, but it's all these extra stuff that you're also applying. So I think with grad program, a lot of people assume that you're just kind of doing your research and you're going home. But there's all these little extra stuff that you continuously have to apply for. So ever since I started my master's, you know, you obviously have the teaching portion that you're doing. So whether you're a TA or a TA coordinator or tutorial leader, but then you also have to start volunteering for specific events or joining clubs or going to conferences and writing papers and publishing manuscripts, and all these different things that you're doing along the way helps you build a really strong application and a really strong CV. And when it comes to external awards like NSERC, these are really intense application processes. Like I remember when I was applying for mine, it took a long time. Like it took me weeks to kind of build a really strong application. And I remember when I finally clicked submit, it was like a huge weight was lifted off of me, because you're kind of piecing together all these years of work that you're doing, and you're trying to kind of create the best application. And another kind of advice I would give to students is to try to maintain connections with other professors as well, right? Because when you apply to these scholarships, most of the time they ask for 2 or 3 reference letters, right? And these are where you want professors who know you, who've seen your work and your research skills, where they're able to write you an amazing letter and not just something generic as, you know, the student deserves this award. So throughout your master's and PhD, it's nice to kind of create these relationships with not just your supervisor and your advisor, but also other professors in the faculty that allow you to kind of get to these opportunities and help you stand out in a field of a bunch of other amazing students and candidates, right? So everyone here in the program is doing the best that they can be, and everyone is doing amazing research, but you always just have to strive to just kind of create new and unique opportunities for yourself. And most of these opportunities that I have on my CV have been available through York, whether I'm, you know, volunteering for a science program at York, or, you know, teaching a Helix program at York for little kids. Everything that you're doing, always try to get these opportunities for yourself, because these scholarship funds, they do help you. You know, you wouldn't, TAs or grad students were not paid, you know, enough to kind of, you know, go through life. So it's nice to get these extra funding opportunities, which really kind of helps you through your research.
I just want to add one thing extra around that too, because I know Farwa and I spoke about a lot of the funding we have received, but there's also a lot of funding, and I'm sure this is the case with Farwa too, that we haven't received, where we've been rejected many times. And that's just also part of the scholarship application process, and grad school application process, I should say too, not just scholarships, but just learning to manage rejection is such an important skill, because you will receive a lot of rejection, more rejection than acceptance. And so although we've been successful, that wasn't without its you know, it's sad days where you get that notice that you did not get this scholarship, or you've been waitlisted for this scholarship, or your application has been desk rejected or something like that, where it's just sent right back to you because you didn't hit one of the qualifications. And that's just part of it. Like, you just kind of need to do it all. You're better off kind of applying to whatever you can, because you know you're going to get at least some rejection. And it's really about increasing your likelihood for success.
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning that too. And my area works on, making sure that the students are able to have, as many scholarship opportunities as possible, working in the scholarship portfolio. But it is also true, some competitions, or many of competitions, are quite selective as well. And sometimes, I can't explain why this application was successful over another one. So that is true that, for each, a selection process that happens, there are students who are successful and others who are not. But really the key is to also seek out as many opportunities as possible. But I also want to mention that from the university, for eligible students, usually research-based full-time students, that there are, this funding for conference, presentation costs, the research costs and things like that, that are more eligibility-based. So usually they're not a significant amount of funding, but they are eligibility-based, meaning that if the student proposal or this proposed activity is, within the scope of the program, then the student would receive to the maximum amount available. So these sort of little pots in funding also, and also the bursaries that are based on financial need, are also made available as well, as a way to have another source, not just a competition merit-based scholarship, but other ones that would be a bit more equitably distributed as well for students who are, pursuing particular area of studies. So just wanted to mention that. But thank you again for sharing many sort of successes and not, successes as well. So I want to ask you a bit about sort of the academic life, or the campus life, or the student life related questions. So first of all, I think all of you probably are around campus quite a bit, even maybe since the COVID, based on your lab experience. Will you say, maybe I'll ask this question to Fawa, sort of the resources and sort of campus support available on campus and around the area in terms of, so just sort of services and available.
I mean, campus life is obviously very different now compared to how it was 2 years ago. So I've been on campus since July of last year. So because we work at a science lab and it's a wet lab, I had to come back. So I was doing my research, and we were pretty much the only people on campus. But kind of speaking to how it was before COVID, I personally really love the campus life. So back when I was an undergrad, I would be kind of more around the campus, going to different buildings. But now as a research student, I'm pretty much just in my building or like another science building, and then kind of just going outside for like a bit or two. But what I really like about the York community is that it's really nice. So it's not like other universities where things are kind of scattered around the place. Everything is kind of together. It's like a nice little community that you have. So whether you want to just do research, you're in your building or facility, wherever you conduct your work. And then there's also all these events and services that are held throughout the year, from September all the way to April. There's events for grad students. So we do have for my department, we have the York University Biology Association. So students, they hold events every week or so where grad students can get together and kind of just burn off a couple of the stress that they've been holding. And it's nice because you can get together, chat. So the campus life is really nice. The food, the just the environment that you're in. So it's really nice to kind of just step outside from your work every once in a while and kind of just be immersed with people. So right now it's finally nice to start seeing people on campus again, because for a while it was just a couple science students here and there. So we're finally starting to see human life on campus, and that's always nice.
It's good to know. Do any of you live on campus currently?
No.
And close to campus? No?
Not really.
No, okay, no, that's fine. That's fine. Just was curious because the campus does have residencies for students and graduate students, and also in the sort of immediate surrounding areas too. A lot of students live around, so that is also a possibility. But some also other students live either downtown Toronto or anywhere else across the GTA. So yeah, I just was curious to ask if that was your experience and how that would be. But yeah, that's great. Next, I think Pedro, I have this question related to sort of the campus life as well, and if you participated in any sort of like I mentioned, any sort of student activities and so forth. But as an international student, do you feel a sense of belonging or not so much in some ways? Like tell us about sort of your honest experience as a student, but as an international student.
I believe that I do feel a sense of belonging. As any students, the first day was the hardest one. So you arrive on campus, you know nobody. You are from a different country, so you don't know how things work here. So it became a little bit scary, but the department created a ceremony, a little meeting before we started the studies, and then they taught everything, or at least the important stuff about the course. And then the department itself creates some little meetings between you and all the students in the department, senior ones. So we get to know each other since the first day. So in the first day, I was able to identify another student from my country, so from Brazil. So you already feel like, okay, at least somebody else is feeling the same way that I'm feeling in the country. So you created a sense of belonging. But then after the first week, second week, you create a sense of belonging with your research team itself, because you will see that each supervisor has 4, 5, 6 students that they are also supervising, and you become close with those students because you have the same research, you help each other in the lab. So it's something that since the beginning, you feel like you are on this together, and you go to the graduate office, you have your neighbors on the graduate office, you become friends with them. You are seeing them almost every day from 9 to 5. So you create those relationships, and you feel like you are part of the York community. And it's something that it wasn't difficult to feel. It was since day one. You feel like, okay, I can be part of this. So York University is a diverse like university. You will see people from all over the world. So definitely you will feel like you fit in. So it's something that as soon as you arrive, you will feel that sense of community. I don't know now during this COVID situation how things are going, because we are trying to keep like certain distance. The graduate office was having some accommodations, but I know that prior to COVID, you had a lot of events with your own colleagues and peers. So it's something that you will feel like you belong since the first week for sure.
And Pedro, so just sort of follow up, do you then after COVID, but now since September, things are starting to a little bit more, they're a bit more in, in-person courses. Do you find that you have a somewhat of a social life on campus as a student?
Yes, I am not going to campus that much, but my friends from before COVID and during COVID, we conduct our own like meetings online, virtual meetings, just to keep in touch with ourselves. So it's something that even during COVID, you have this community to support you and that is going through the same things that you are. So yes, definitely, we still keep on this.
Okay, that's good to know. And so Carly, so related questions as well, like how do you keep sort of your social life or your non-student, life as a grad student, especially during the pandemic? And I guess pandemic situation have changed a little bit, but has it been hard, or do you have a way to sort of connect?
I'll be honest. I'm going to be honest that at the start of the pandemic, it was quite difficult because a lot of my social time came from being on campus, being in the lab, being with my lab mates. One thing that our lab ended up doing was we scheduled a monthly Zoom meeting with just the grad students, because we do also have undergrads and RAs and postdocs. So it was just a grad students, and it was kind of to make up for that time that we would normally just be passing each other in the lab and have these canned conversations about courses and this issue with this professor and this stress with this application, and all the things that you kind of the support that you look to get from your colleagues, your classmates, and your peers. We wanted to make up for that, especially for the incoming grad students who didn't get to have that in their first year or first 2 years of the program. For me, one thing that really helped with my social life was I got a puppy during COVID, and my supervisor said to me, "You're really going to get a puppy while you're trying to write a dissertation?" And I did. And, that actually really helped me. I'm not recommending everyone get puppies, but I mean, if you do, I support it. But it really, for me, was a way to find balance again. And remind myself that not everything is about grad school. It's just kind of one piece of my identity, but it's not my whole life, which it really felt like it had been for a long time. And so I've been able to give myself some structure again. And that's helped me just be more sociable outside of just being in the lab and doing my research and things like that.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and definitely it's been a challenge for for students and really everyone at the university. But yeah, our hope is that we will be able to gradually return, and so the students who are starting or who started last year and this year, definitely it's been a bit of a challenge and a unique experience coming to grad program, but without actually coming to campus for the most part. But there are also, as Carl, you mentioned that there's an online sort of way to support each other and such. So yeah, the students are always going to find a way, and will always find a way to connect and manage our programs and studies. So that's good to know. Okay, so there are a couple more questions I have as well. Do you all teach TA? Just sort of if we can describe the experience of being a teaching assistant, kind of what is kind of the commitment, the time commitment, and also any other commitment as a teaching assistant while you complete your studies, and just sort of give a background sort of information for most research-based graduate students, doctoral level especially, the teaching assistantship is a general component of the funding package. So most PhD students do TA. Some master's level students do as well. So maybe I'll ask this to Fao, like what's your experience been TAing and kind of the commitment and balancing of that with other things that you have to do?
Yeah, for sure. I think the first time being a TA is always just very weird because it's like overnight you go from being a student in a lab to now teaching students a lab. So it's always such an interesting transition. And I remember the first time I TA'd, I felt very out of my element. I was like, oh my God, like, am I qualified enough to teach? Because I went straight into teaching a third year course. So I was like, oh my God, am I qualified enough to teach a third year level animal physiology course? And I'm like 5'2", so I'm already very short. And you go into the lab and it's like a bunch of people who look older than you. So it's a very interesting experience. But I've been a TA for 3 years, and then now I'm a TA coordinator. So I've been a TA coordinator for 2 years. And I absolutely love it. I realized right into my first TA session that I really love teaching students. And I remember when I was a student, I always used to think that, oh my God, like if I was a TA, I would teach like this, or I would always make sure that I do this. So at least with science courses, most of the TAing that we do is TAing lab sections. So these are the 3-hour labs that we have. We can also be a marker grader where you're kind of just marking tests, midterms, assignments, whether you're also just invigilating midterms. And then the TA coordinator is someone who kind of just oversees all the TAs and all the labs that are going around. And depending on how many TA sections you get per semester. So as a first year master student, I did get a full TA ship. So depending on the commitment, each TA job has. So for some of my courses that had a weekly lab, and I was had to TA every single section, and we had lab reports. That was a pretty that was like 0.25 units. So if I had 2 of those, it was a lot. Definitely, especially in your first year of master's, where you're kind of transitioning into becoming a grad student. You have courses, you're starting your research, and now you're also a TA, and now you have to mark lab reports. So that first semester, I think for me was definitely the most difficult, because this is the first time I had all these different types of commitments and jobs that I had to do. And it kind of took me a while to learn how to juggle everything. But after a while, you kind of get used to it. You become more confident in marking. It doesn't take you that long. Or if you're like me and you've been teeing the same course for the past 5 years, you don't need the same prep time, right? You go in and now you know exactly what you're doing. But teaching has been such an amazing opportunity. You get experience of teaching, but you also get to teach students and inspire students from an earlier stage in their undergrad about research life. So usually at the end of all my TAing sections, I would get students come up to me and ask me about my own work and my own research. And I made a lot of connections, even with my students along the way. I've poached a couple undergrads into my own lab. I would tell my supervisor, like, oh, this student is really good. If she applies or if he applies, let's get them into our lab. So we've gotten a lot of students into our lab as well, like that. So it's definitely a learning curve into how to juggle both TAing and your own research work. But once you kind of get used to it, you realize it kind of goes with your research. So if you're like TAing Tuesdays and Thursdays, you kind of in your head always schedule your experiments like that. I can be like, okay, I'll do this Monday, Tuesday I'm TAing, but Wednesday I'll do this. But it's been really great. And now as a TA coordinator, I don't have to physically TA anymore. So that's nice because I get more time for my research. But obviously now I get more emails from students and I have to organize the lab. So that's a lot more work, but it's nice that you get these different opportunities. So in Pedro's case, he wants to go into teaching, right? So this is really nice window and preview that you get into. If you really love TAing right from the start, this is a really nice stepping stone into becoming a professor, because there's also awards that you can get as being a TA. I know every year with the science faculty, I think it's all of grad faculty, they have like the best TA award. So even getting something like that will look really great on your CV when you're going into a teaching position. So that itself has been really nice because it gives you an idea of all these different streams that you can choose after research life, if you want to go into teaching or if you want to just be in research. So that's been really nice.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And then it is true. So the teaching award, yes, it does exist. I'm not too familiar with that, but there's also the teaching commons at the university that sort of does a support of TAs about, to provide different resources and training. So yes, TAs are not just thrown out to in the classroom to just teach. Yeah, and then I think some programs have, TAs that are very closely related to their own area research. Others might be a little bit different. So the TA structure is a little bit different across campus, but generally it's a component of a lot of the doctoral students and some master's students as part of their funding package. So yeah, thanks for that information. Generally, the general expectations that he spend about 10 hours per week teaching when they're teaching. Is that around what you experience as well? I see some nod. Power maybe a little bit different. Okay, so yes, just generally that is the case. So again, individual differences might be a little bit different, but just so that the audience have some sort of general sense of what they can expect. Okay, so just a few more questions left, and sort of in all of your grad student life so far, this question is, what has been the most memorable part? And it doesn't have to be about your research, just being a grad student, or not even being a grad student, but during the time that you're pursuing grad studies. I want to ask this maybe to Carly. Anything related to being a grad student that's been the most memorable?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things. Like I'm in my, like trying to think, my 6th year now of grad school, plus my 4 years of my undergrad, plus 2 years that I took between that. And so like this whole journey, it's so hard to pinpoint one moment. There's like sad memories and happy memories, and it's quite an emotional roller coaster. I think some of the best moments and some of the things I've enjoyed the most are probably just traveling with my lab for conferences, and we work hard, but we also play hard on those conference trips. And we've gotten to go places where we, have a day presenting our research, and then we find somewhere and go for dinner or go for drinks. And it's not just about the science, which is, we all love the science. That's why we're here. And that's why we're doing this. We enjoy it. It's stimulating, but we also like to just have that time where you're networking in a really informal environment. And that's where you really build these relationships and bonds with the people that you work with every day. So for us, like, we went to Scotland the summer before the pandemic. And we just keep reminiscing on that trip now because we haven't gotten to go anywhere else since then. But it was just, we finished the conference and we decided to go travel the city together. And so some of those things are just, things I'm going to remember for a long time after grad school.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. And hopefully we'll soon get to be able to experience, with students are able to experience things like that soon. So we'll hope that. Pedro or Fawa, did you want to add anything related to anything memorable in your studies? I have 2 more questions to go around as well.
I would say that memorable thing in my case was teaching for the first time in the class. So it was a 4th year class, and it was a huge, like 50 students. And for me, I was really nervous, but when I entered the class, I felt I was on my own element. So that was memorable to me. Another moment that was memorable was presenting my master's thesis. So you have been working on that dissertation for 2 years, and then you go and present in 15 minutes. It's something that you cannot condensate it in 15 minutes. But when you do, and you are able to present, and you feel like you did something, a research that is going to impact the community in a good way, it's really memorable. It's going to stay on my mind forever. And now, after the PhD, hopefully 4 or 5 years from now, I'm going to do the exact same thing with my PhD dissertation. So I'm just counting the days until that comes.
Right. Okay. And the defense is definitely a special moment, I think,
Yes.
for all students. And it's often in a sort of a public, so people can see as well, at least before COVID. Yeah, so no, this is definitely special. And congrats that you were able to complete master's and now in the doctoral students, and hopefully in a few years. Yes, as you said. Another defense. Okay, so Fawa, I have a question about sort of things that you wish you knew before you began your graduate degree. Do you have anything that you want to share with people who are thinking about doing graduate degrees? The thing that you didn't expect would be the case, either about your program or anything around university.
That's a really interesting question. I'm not sure. I didn't know what I was getting into when I went into grad school. Like, I think grad school is a whole other world. Like, it's not something that you have one sort of expectation, and then when you're there, it's going to be completely different. I feel like any type of idea that you have in your mind, I don't think you can kind of even see what this grad school life is gonna give you. I kind of like that I went into it blind, to be honest. I had like no expectations. I didn't think it was going to be either this way or this way. I kind of went into it just ready for whatever kind of surprises or obstacles or triumphs it would come along my way. But I think one of the biggest things before applying to grad school is, one, kind of really knowing what you want to study. I think a lot of students who kind of go into master's or PhD, they do it very hastily without kind of understanding the commitment they're about to be making. So whether you're doing a master's, which is 2 years, or a PhD, which can go up to like 6-7 years, depending on the work that you're doing, this is a huge time commitment. So really researching the field that you're going in and the supervisor that you're going to have to be working with. The supervisor relationship that you have is really important. Your supervisor can make or break your program. If you don't like your supervisor, or if they're not who you thought they would be, chances are you're not going to have a good memory of your grad program, which is really sad, because grad school in general is an amazing experience. But it's really key that you have a good research, a good supervisor, and a good lab environment. Like the people that you're with, they're pretty much your family. Like that's it. Like Pedro said, like you see them every day, 9 to 5. And that's not really something that you can research or know beforehand, right? Every year, students come in and out. But I was fortunate enough to have an amazing lab setting when I entered my master's. We all kind of went into it together. We became really close friends. So although I did my research when I entered the grad program, I knew that this is a supervisor that I like. I did a thesis with them in the beginning just to know for sure whether I would want to continue a grad program with the same supervisor. So that's nice. I got a little preview. I was like, okay, wait, he's great. He's an amazing supervisor. He's doing really well in his field. So I would love to continue my master's and PhD. So yeah, I guess in conclusion, there's really no expectations I feel like you can have about grad school, because it's a whole other journey. But just to make sure that you're mentally prepared with what it's going to be, and to do your research into the lab that you're about to be in. Because if you have a great lab setting and a great research and a great prof, then you're going to have an amazing time in that program.
Yeah, good to know. And you mentioned, a few things about the supervisor, and I think that also depends a little bit in the disciplines. I think in the disciplines that you are in, science, engineering, and health, you tend to have a supervisor probably before you began your doctoral degree. In other programs, students actually come without a supervisor. It's usually social science and arts programs, so they are able to sort of do courses, fine tune their research topic, and then find a supervisor while they're taking the courses and so forth. But in any case, it still is important to find a good supervisor that they are able to work with well, they're able to support the students and so forth. Sometimes it is possible to change supervisors for those programs. I don't know if that will be the case. I've seen some, cases of a science program having switching supervisors and so forth, but, ideally it is not a situation that, that would tend to take more time and so forth. So, if you have a supervisor that you work very well with, I think that would be the best too. That's true. Yeah, thank you. So last question to all of you. Fawad mentioned a little bit on this already, but what advice would you give to people who are thinking about graduate program? And either at York or it could be elsewhere. So this, the people who are joining this, to really, this session today is really sort of find out A, the grad program, what it's like to be a grad student, but B, to be a York student as well. So it could be, in both ways. So Carly, can I ask what advice you would give to people who are thinking about pursuing a grad program?
I'm trying to think about like what I wish someone had told me before I started, but I don't know if that's the advice that I would give other people. I think I would just say kind of, in line with what Farwa's been saying as well, is that really think about like, why do you want to pursue grad school? Like, what is it about doing extra school, more school that draws you in? Is it because you want to be able to do research? Is it because you want to be some sort of clinician? Is the case you want to work with a certain population? Do you want to be a teacher? Do you want to be, and really think about it, because it is a time commitment. That's really the biggest thing, is that it's not, most people, when you go into grad school, don't drop out of grad school. It's kind of something like once you're in, not that you can't, but it just isn't that common that happens. So the people that are here really do want to be here. And so I think you just need to think about it. Is this something that I really want to do? Am I prepared to commit myself to this X number of years, this type of stress, this type of environment? And if it is, go for it and don't give up. Don't give up. You know, it took me a couple of years to get into grad school. I didn't get in right out of undergrad or even right on my first year of applying. So it might take a couple tries, but if this is something that you really want to do, don't give up on that. Just keep working to it.
Well, that's good to know. So yes, that is true. Like not everyone, and actually, in fact, I think I would say a lot of graduate students at York don't come to do grad studies right after the undergrad. You know, they might take a break. They might actually not be thinking about grad school when they completed undergrad and do something else that bring them back to school. But yeah, that advice, I think it's really a good point that, you know, knowing what you really want to do and then sort of be, you know, ready to be in the environment that you'll be in. I think that's, you know, that's really important. So thank you. Yeah, Pedro, again, as an international student as well, you might have a bit different sort of, you know, perspective and advice that you might be able to share. So yeah, so what would you say to someone who is thinking about either, you know, coming back to school to do master's or doctoral, or are in school undergrad and thinking about grad school?
I think the advice is just like Carly. Take your time to think about what you want to pursue in the future and choose your field of study or doing the grad school based on that. So as long as you have a final objective, doing your master will feel like you are doing it for some reason. So you don't want to enter into graduate school to be questioning yourself, oh, should I have come here? Should I be doing this research? It's not a good mentality to go through because you have a lot to do. So you have to go through it. So think about what you are going to be doing. If you are an international student, it's kind of a big decision because you are going to be away from most of your family and friends that you've created for your entire life. So, but as soon as you are here, be mindful that you are going to create new friends as well. And due to social media nowadays, we are going to still remain with our old relationships because we can talk to them. So don't think that by coming here, you might feel lonely. You will feel like you don't belong in the place because it's something that you will most likely not feel. And I think the third advice I would give would be to kind of prepare and organize your time. Thesis and dissertation is something that takes time to be written. So do your research, keeping mindful that you will have to write at some point. So create your time, create your own calendar, prepare your time, see for yourself how much time you need to write a 30 pages literature review so that you have a better basis of how much time you will take to finish your thesis. So prepare your calendar and know a little bit more of yourself in terms of writing. It's one advice that I would give.
Yeah, thank you, Pedro. Good point. Fawa, would you like to add anything in terms of advice to future students?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. This is one of the biggest things I feel like all students should consider when applying to grad program. But I guess just one thing extra is, you know, once you realize that grad school is for you and you've successfully gotten into the program, I think one of the biggest things I would say is try to really step outside of your comfort zone. I feel like grad school is a phase in your life where you're able to do all these things that you never would have considered, but to really be successful in your field and to get opportunities that you wouldn't have thought twice about before, you have to step out of your little bubble. Like if you're always someone who kind of likes to do things by yourself, or, you know, you're a little shy or whatever the case is, it's really important to kind of evolve and grow as your research grows as well. So whether it's going to conferences and presenting your work in front of hundreds of people you don't know, and professionals in the field and who've been established for many years, or, you know, when they have those little social hours, you know, I'm someone who used to be very shy, but, you know, when you're already traveling across the country and you're visiting this conference, you know, go to these social hours, go up to other faculty or supervisors from other countries and, talk to them and maintain and create relationships and connections, you'd be surprised of how many different opportunities you find just from that. They see your research and, you can build a collaboration just based off of one interaction that you wouldn't have been able to do if you didn't step out of your comfort zone. So that's one of the biggest things, is the skills, and both research and life skills that you learn in grad school really helps you grow as a person. And I feel like the person that I am now is really different from the 20-something-year-old who entered into master's a couple years ago. And it's really nice seeing how much confidence and how much skills I've gained along the way. So really, like, once you're in here, try to not only just limit yourself to research, but really open yourself to all these other opportunities that are available.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think all of you, throughout this session, like sort of, providing different aspects of, the things that you do as a graduate student. And that's really not just about research, but it's all, it's about the teaching, it's about making connections, it's about the lab work. So, really all these elements that make up the graduate student and what, the graduate student's successful life. So that's really good to know. So thank you. Pedro, just to sort of follow up a little bit on this, do you have any sort of advice to give on this, specifically in preparing an application for admissions to help them be successful? I know that, Carly and Farla, you also of course applied to grad school, but you also did undergrad at York. So Pedro, like from your sort of experience, do you have any sort of particular tips that you might share with applicants for admissions?
Yes. So the first step is try to contact your supervisor before. I remember that I prepared an email, I put my CV, I put my transcript, and I put any publication that I did during my undergrad when I was contacting my supervisor, just to make sure that he knows me and that I know about his research. The other advice I would give is, because if you are an international student, you have to look for a transcript that is efficient in the English language. So you have to go through a person that is going to make the translation and sign up. So you have to go through that. Don't leave it for the last time, because it might take 5 business days for them to do the translation. So you have to have that in hand. Another advice would be related to the proficiency English test. So make sure you prepare for that and take some time to take before applying for the graduate program, because if you are unable to pass in the first time, you can try it again, you can study a little bit more. So these are things that don't leave it for the last minute, because you might not have time to gather all the documents. So make sure to gather all of them before applying.
Yeah, good to know. And that is the case for admissions. That is the case for the scholarship application. So yeah, thank you for sharing that tip. So quickly, now it's time almost to wrap up. So I want to, with this was the last question. I want to say thank you so much for all the panelists for, generally spending the time with us today, answering all the questions, providing very honest perspective